All right, so in this video, we are going to be talking about practitioner listings versus standard listings and which one is really the one that you need to be setting up for your medical practices. But before we get to that, we need to really understand what Google My Business is. So it's a tool. It's a free way for you to add your business information, your hours of operation, your website to your local presence. It's actually the core of pretty much local search. If you want to be found and you want your patients to find you and you want new patients to find you, then you need to have a Google My Business listings. Now, the way you set this up is going to really depend on the type of practice that you have and the type of structure that you have within your practice. So there's two types of listings when it comes to healthcare. There's a standard business listing, and then there is a practitioner listing. And the one that's right for you, it depends a little bit on how you're set up in your practice. And we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. But before we go any further, the guidelines are really the key here. This is important. So Google has a set of guidelines just like all these other sites like Yelp and Vitals and Health Grades and WebMD and everything else. They have a way that they want their information to be displayed. So in other words, they only allow one business listing per location. Okay, so one business listing per location at a time. So if you have a practice, and let's say you're an orthopedic surgeon, and the name of your practice is ABC Orthopedics, you cannot have two ABC Orthopedic business listings. Now you can have one ABC Orthopedic business listing and one listing for the physician, for the practicing MD underneath that, if you have more than one provider. But if you are a solo practitioner, like you can see down here below, if you're a solo practitioner, meaning if your practice is ABC Orthopedics and you are just one doctor, you're the sole facing provider for that practice, then it's usually a best practices to leave that one listing and sort of share it with your name. So here's what that looks like. So in the example that I just said, ABC Orthopedics, you're one doctor. Let's say you're Dr. Smith, and you have one location. So just create one business listing for your practice, and you can tie your name to that because that's going to be sort of synonymous with your practice. But if you are ABC Orthopedics and you have multiple practitioners, you have Dr. Jang, Dr. Smith, Dr. Doe, then you are allowed to have one listing for that specific practice. So ABC Orthopedics is going to have one listing, and then each one of those providers can have their own individual listing that sort of nest underneath that. Those are treated separately. Each one of those providers listings is treated as a separate identity, a separate business, because let's say that two out of those three doctors start at like 9 a.m. and end their day at 7, but one comes in at 6 and ends its day at 4. So you want to be able to distinguish that somewhere besides your website, and that's what these listings are really for. So now that we talked a little bit about what that looks like, let's jump into some real life examples of what this actually sort of looks like for you. So I did a search here for orthopedic surgeon New York. So in this example, this is an example of the very first option where you have one practice with one practicing physician or one front-facing physician. And there's no other doctors in this practice. So if I do a search for orthopedic surgeon New York and we come down here, these are the listings that I'm talking about here. So we're looking at Manhattan Orthopedic Care, Dr. Armin, for example. Manhattan Orthopedic Care and Dr. Armin are synonymous. So they have one listing that they share because he's the only practicing provider there. So if we look at the brand name, so instead of searching for orthopedic surgeon New York, we looked for Manhattan Orthopedic Care, which is the name of his brand, and you can sort of see his listing here. So Manhattan Orthopedic Care, Dr. Armin is right there. The other thing is, if we look at Dr. Armin now, if we do a search for just the physician's name, which is very, very likely, this is how people find physicians today. This is how new patients find you, and this is how existing patients find you. They just Google your name. They sort of very rarely Google the practice. You can see that it's the exact same thing because Dr. Armin in this case and Manhattan Orthopedic Care are synonymous and they're one and the same. There's only one doctor there. And you can see that this is his website, and that confirms that there's only one practicing physician in this in this area. Now, what happens if you have more than one practitioner? Let me show you what that looks like. So if we look for Houston Methodist Orthopedics, right? You can see that this is a big clinic and they have multiple practitioners. So if I look at this business listing, this is their main listing and they have all these providers, right? So we're looking at their main listing and that's what showed up if we typed in the actual name. But if we look for some of those doctors, let's just say um, uh, look for one of their individual physicians, now you can see that rather than having the brand name, rather than having their clinic name, this doctor actually has their own listing, and this is a practitioner's listing, a provider listing, right? So this is the difference. Like in this case, you have more than one practitioner. They can have their own individual practitioner listings. They can list their own stuff, and they can get reviews from their own patients that they see, etc., etc., etc. And then the other one is more of a general type listing. So that's the difference between um, the provider listing or the practitioner listing and the standard business listing. Now, how your practice is set up really is going to dictate how you want to handle this situation here. All right, so if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe to this channel below. Also, in the description, there's going to be a link to the Google My Business guidelines and a link to the actual Google My Business Center where you can sign up for an account, or where you can check for your business or your practice to see if you've claimed your account. Again, go ahead and subscribe, because this is going to be part of a series of videos that is going to focus on practitioner listings specifically, and what you can do to increase your local visibility and increase the chances of patients finding you and increase the chances of new patients coming through your door. And if you know of a doctor friend or anybody who can benefit from this video, go ahead and share it with them.